What happens when the idea of one single Black identity starts to fall apart? Today, we're going to dive into a really raw, pretty emotional conversation from a call-in show that just lays bare this growing tension inside the Black diaspora. It's a fight over identity, respect, and whether you can really just hit the reset button on a painful past. Okay, so this whole thing kicks off with this incredibly hopeful plea from a Somali caller. You can almost hear the desperation in his voice. He's asking for a truce, a complete restart between Black immigrants and what are called foundational Black Americans. And this one question is really at the center of everything we're talking about today. Is a fresh start even possible? All right, before we go any further, we have to nail down this key term, foundational Black American, or FBA. Now, this is more than just a label. It's a very specific identity. It's meant to distinguish Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved right here in the United States from Black immigrants who arrived more recently. And believe me, that distinction is absolutely crucial for the whole rest of this conversation. So what's really at the heart of all this? Well, it's this fundamental shift away from an old idea. The idea that in America, if you've got Black skin, you're all in the same boat. That's changing. The first caller he nails the change perfectly. He looks back 10, maybe 20 years ago, and the vibe was, hey, we're all just Black. There was this sense of a shared struggle. But today, his exact words were, everybody's delineating. People are drawing lines, creating their own specific groups, and pulling apart. And that shift is really the core of all this tension. And if you look at it from the immigrant perspective, which the caller explains, this whole delineation thing feels threatening. There's this very real fear that as foundational Black Americans start focusing on their own specific history and their own political agenda, immigrants are going to get left out in the cold, pushed aside, especially when the political climate is already so hostile. Okay, so you've got this growing divide. What's the fix? Well, the caller puts a solution on the table that sounds, on the surface, pretty straightforward. His plan is pretty simple, right? It's 3 steps. 1, just forget the past. 2, sign a new social contract. And 3, let's just start over, treat each other with respect. I mean, it sounds great. It's optimistic, it's hopeful, but as you're about to see, it is nowhere near that simple. Because the show's host, he is not having it. He immediately pushes back, and he pushes back hard. He argues that this nice, simple call for a truce completely ignores years and years of disrespect. For him, a line has already been drawn, and it's been drawn in the sand. And what's so fascinating here is how the host talks about delineation. He says it's not some aggressive move, it's a defensive one. He says it's a reaction to being told we ain't Black by some immigrants, a reaction to having your political interests undermined, a reaction to what he feels is just constant arrogance. The key here is that for him, it's not about causing division. It's about protecting his community and, frankly, vetting who's actually on their side. And this quote, this gets right to the emotional heart of his argument. He's talking about hearing all these stereotypes for years, about immigrants working so hard and Black Americans being lazy, and he says the FBA community basically said, fine, you think we're lazy? Okay, we'll just focus on ourselves then. And now, he claims, people are upset because that self-focus is actually starting to pay off. And just when you think this is all about politics and ideas, the conversation takes a hard left turn. It gets personal, deeply, deeply personal. A new caller phones in, and her story just puts a human face on this entire complicated conflict. So this caller, her background is everything to this story. Her mom is foundational Black American, her dad is Nigerian. She is literally living at the crossroads of this cultural clash. And her experience, it's just harrowing. And boom, right out of the gate, she confirms exactly what the host was just talking about. She says, yeah, she's heard those stereotypes her whole life. She even uses the specific derogatory term akatas that's sometimes used to call Black Americans lazy. Her story just unfolds like this really tragic timeline. Her Nigerian father comes over to the US, then he gets caught up in white-collar crime, insurance fraud, things like that. He ends up getting deported, can never come back. And the result? Her foundational Black American mother is left behind to raise 4 kids all by herself. But believe it or not, the story gets even darker. Years go by and she decides to visit her father in Nigeria, a trip that she says nearly killed her. She straight up accuses her own dad of being money hungry and says he robbed her. This is where the conflict goes from being a sad family story to a profound personal betrayal. I mean, just look at the horror of this trip. She gets mysteriously, terribly sick, so sick she thinks it might be black magic or that they're trying to sacrifice her. And her father's explanation? It was just to strengthen her character. He took her emergency money, claiming he would just hold on to it for her. He even tried to set up a sham marriage so some guy could get immigration papers. The gap between what he did and how he justified it is just, it's chilling.
And in the end, she kind of wraps up her story with this reflection on karma. It's her way of trying to make sense of all the pain and betrayal. She basically says, you just can't do dark things to people and expect your own life to turn out well.
And this is the moment. This is where the host takes this incredibly personal, traumatic story and connects it right back to the larger political argument he's been making all along. You see, for him, this isn't just one sad, isolated incident. This becomes Exhibit A. He holds her story up as the ultimate reason why a simple truce gets rejected, why it's seen as naive and totally unacceptable by so many in the FBA community. It represents a level of mistrust that comes from real, painful experiences just like this one.
And this quote is basically his final verdict. He's pointing out the hypocrisy he sees. He's saying, they project all these stereotypes onto us, but then they're the ones scamming and robbing their own children. And then he just asks, how can anyone act shocked that we want to delineate, that we want to separate ourselves after something like that?
Which leaves all of us with a really tough question to chew on. Remember that first caller? He asked for a restart, a new contract. But after hearing a story of such a deep, personal betrayal, you have to ask yourself, when trust is broken that badly, is a simple truce really enough to heal a divide like this?